The story begins with our protagonist, Finn, getting heckled by his toxic girlfriend, Alfine, who is one of only 3 sword masters, for being a useless man. To Finn, Alfine isn't just a legendary sword master. She's his childhood friend and also his lover, who used to be kind to him. But everything changed when Alfine became a noble sword master. Since then, she's taken out her stress on him constantly, calling him a spineless loser who can't do anything right. Suddenly, Finn stands tall and makes a bold decision, shouting that from now on he quits being her toy boyfriend. Alfine stares in disbelief, completely caught off guard. Finn explains that he's found a new purpose and will become an adventurer instead. Alfine panics, struggling to process what the boy is saying, and then points at him, saying there's no way he can become an adventurer on his own. But Finn keeps his cool. He says he's made up his mind and then walks off without looking back. First off, Finn changes his appearance, dyeing his hair red and cutting it short to avoid being recognized. The barber compliments his fresh boy look, joking that girls in the city are about to go wild for this new look. Then he gives Finn a fake lens to complete the makeover. Grateful, Finn thanks him, puts it on, and feels ready for his new life. Excited, Finn reasons that with this transformation, even Alfine won't recognize him anymore. Now in the busy streets, Finn looks around for the Adventurers Guild. Suddenly, he spots it and is surprised to see the building is much bigger than he expected. As he steps inside, a friendly receptionist named Rebecca welcomes him and asks if he wants to register as a new adventurer. Finn confirms he does, and before long, he's sitting at a table filling out forms. Once that's done, Rebecca explains the guild ranks: iron, bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. She says adventurers are split into 3 types: hunters, searchers, and excavators, and the more requests they complete, the higher their rank. With that, she congratulates him on becoming an adventurer, hands him an insignia, and tells him to wear it proudly. After that, Rebecca brings out a black orb and offers Finn a free magic power test, which is a standard for new adventurers. Finn hesitates, remembering how Alfine always called magic heresy. But then, since it's free, he decides to try anyway. With that, Rebecca then instructs him to place his hand on the crystal ball, assuring him that the orb will change color depending on his magic power. However, before Finn can even place his hand on the orb, the crystal ball explodes, shattering instantly. Shocked, Finn stares at the fragments while Rebecca apologizes, thinking it's defective, and quickly brings out another orb. But the same thing happens. The second crystal explodes. Rebecca trembles, remembering only one other person has ever broken the crystal: Nolia, the infinite mage. As people start whispering and questioning if Finn really has the same level of terrifying power as Nolia, Finn tries to play it cool. He shrugs and says both crystals must have just been defective. But Rebecca, still in disbelief, rushes off, promising to call the guild master for a proper measurement. Suddenly, the room falls silent as a girl enters gracefully. The crowd whispers as a girl with long blonde hair and a staff steps forward, and Rebecca is speechless. It's Nolia, the legend herself. Nolia approaches Finn, saying she's been watching him since he arrived and can sense his overwhelming magical power. Suddenly, the girl suggests they skip the guild's inspection and instead try magic power synchronization. Confused, Finn admits he has no idea what that means. Nolia looks surprised and asks if he really doesn't know. She then decides to explain. Magic power synchronization, she says, means holding hands and channeling magic together while enhancing each other's power. She adds that it's similar to touching the crystal ball, but more personal and potentially dangerous. Finn agrees, but as he reaches out, panic erupts among the adventurers. They whisper urgently. Average mages can't handle Nolia's overwhelming power. Even Rebecca shouts desperately, warning Nolia against doing this. Ignoring their concern, Nolia calmly takes Flint's hand, eyes closed, ready for the synchronization. Instantly, Finn feels energy being sucked out of his body, and Nolia is suddenly overwhelmed. She is shocked to see how much magic is pouring from Finn as her body starts to shake like a rusty blender. She gasps, realizing Finn's magic is beyond anything she's ever seen, and it just keeps coming. Meanwhile, Finn stands there awkwardly, perfectly normal. He thinks maybe he's done something wrong, but reminds himself she's the one who started this. Suddenly, Rebecca notices Nolia getting drained and finally steps in, yelling for Finn to stop. Nolia tries to act tough, insisting she can take more, despite looking ready to faint. Before anyone realizes what's happening, the girl collapses on the spot. Rebecca quickly gathers her into her arms and then starts to panic. She warns Finn that Nolia is the daughter of the city's ruling count, and if word gets out, this could turn into serious trouble. Finn tries to explain that he just got dragged into this, but when he turns around, he realizes everyone in the guild has already fled, leaving him alone in the nightmare. As Nolia lies in Rebecca's arms, completely wiped out, Finn panics, realizing just how deep into trouble he's gotten. Meanwhile, Alfine rolls restlessly in bed, grumbling about Finn's decision to live on his own, and finds it so frustrating that he's become so independent. She can't believe Finn has abandoned everything she gave him. High-grade equipment, the money for his luxury lifestyle, and even the commemorative sword they exchanged when they first became adventurers. Frustrated, Alfine starts biting her nails like a gremlin, wondering what she did wrong and why Finn chose to leave her after all the time they spent together. Suddenly, her gray-headed butler, Vigo, enters the room and asks if everything is okay. Alfine panics, worried he caught her in the act of nail-munching. She nervously brushes off his concern, saying she's fine and was just about to change into her loungewear. All the while, she thinks to herself that if Finn were still around, he would have read the room and kept anyone from seeing her disgusting habit. Following that, she asks Vigo if he's inquired at the Adventurers Guild about Finn's whereabouts. The old geezer replies that they've already hired various adventurers to search the locations she provided, but despite looking everywhere, nobody can find Finn. He adds that it's almost like the guy has disappeared from the surface of the earth. Alfine tries not to panic, but the worry is written all over her face. Frustrated, she tells herself she doesn't want people thinking she's been abandoned. Determined, she orders her butler to extend the search to neighboring towns and to find Finn no matter the cost. Vigo nods and promises to expand the search to the nearby cities, then quietly leaves the room. Now alone, Alfine lies sprawled on her bed, sighing in frustration. Despite all her efforts, she still can't find Finn. She reasons that if she could search for him herself, she'd find him in one shot. But ever since receiving her peerage and becoming a knight, her duties have only piled up. Sadly, she wishes Finn had just been more obedient. At this point, she's so desperate she'd do anything for another chance, even kneel before him and apologize if it meant keeping him by her side. Back at the guild, the protagonist sneezes loudly, spraying saliva everywhere. Rebecca looks on, a bit concerned, and asks if he's caught a cold. Flynn brushes it off, saying he just had a sudden chill. After that, Flynn tells Rebecca he wants to claim his reward from yesterday's quest, trying his best to ignore the nerves creeping up his spine. But that uneasy feeling lingers, almost like he's being watched. Rebecca then hands over his reward and compliments Flynn on his skillful choice of quests, saying he's like an experienced adventurer. Excited, Flynn accepts the money, thinking back to how he had to throw his former platinum emblem in the trash just to cover his tracks and stay one step ahead of Alfine. While chatting, Flynn notices Nolia quietly peeking out from behind a pillar, watching his every move, so he begs Rebecca to please do something about the nutcase. Rebecca, confused, asks what he's talking about. Flynn explains that ever since Nolia fainted during their magic synchronization, the loose screw has been watching him around the clock. Frustrated, he complains that just the other day, she followed him all the way to his inn, and now it's starting to feel like he's living with a girl before marriage. Feeling cornered, Rebecca quickly shuts down his request, saying it's impossible to stop Nolia. She says before now, Nolia has never lost to anyone in magic synchronization, and because of that, she's earned special privileges. Rebecca adds that she doesn't see any real harm in Nolia just monitoring him. She also shows Flynn a letter, an official directive from Nolia's powerful family, asking the guild to ignore their crazy daughter's actions. Realizing resistance is pointless, Flynn resigns himself to being under Nolia's watchful eye. Still, he tries to look on the bright side. If she's only observing him, maybe it's not so bad. For the last time, Flynn pleads with Rebecca once more to just say something to her. He explains that when he tried to talk to Nolia himself, she just ran away. But Rebecca, with her signature smile, refuses again, saying it's impossible. Before long, Finn ventures into the outskirts of the forest on a solo quest. There, he encounters some bunch of ugly mud golems terrorizing the area and tries wiping out a few, but more just keep popping out of the ground. Realizing it'll be a pain if they keep surrounding him, Finn decides to take them all out at once. Charging forward with determination, his blade slices cleanly through the muddy heads of the monsters. After a fierce round, he finishes off the last golem, catches his breath, and hopes that's finally the end of them. With the fight over, Finn grabs his bag, ready to head back. In a flashback, the protagonist reflects on how Nolia has been following him ever since he left the guild. Refusing to be monitored, he had to dash into the forest, hoping to lose her in the crowd. In the present, Finn turns to check if Nolia is still tailing him, only to realize she's gone. Panicking, Finn fears she might be in danger and immediately rushes into the bushes. There he finds Nolia's cloak abandoned, soaked in a disgusting, slimy fluid. Rushing into the tall grass, Finn finds Nolia tangled in the vines of a vicious man-eating plant, about to devour her. To save her, the protagonist charges in, yelling for her to hold on. He slashes at the vines, but they keep growing back, making the rescue a real struggle. Meanwhile, Nolia is almost at the verge of death as the creature's tentacles penetrate deeper than I did your mom last night. Finn, realizing the situation has become extremely dangerous, pleads with her to hold on for a while as he looks for a solution. With one final swing, Finn chops through the vines of the monstrous plant and finally frees Nolia. She coughs and collapses to the ground, covered in sticky fluid. Nolia then thanks him, but Finn tells her to swallow her thanks for later, emphasizing the need to leave at once, and then asks her to hurriedly get on her knees sorry on his back. Nolia blushes hard, but then grabs onto his neck. But before they can take a step, Nolia insists she can burn the monsters away with her magic. Finn then agrees and says he's counting on her to help them get out of this predicament. So Nolia gathers her strength and fires off a massive fire lance spell that burns through the creature's defenses with overwhelming power. After such a powerful attack, Nolia is embarrassed to see that her cloak has vanished. Finn then offers his cloak to cover her up, and she quietly thanks him, explaining her father hates it when guys see her bare skin. After that, she uses her water magic to clean off the sticky acid left on her skin. Once that's done, the protagonist suggests walking Nolia back to the city, but she declines, assuring him she's fine, and then asks him to continue on his job request. Feeling a bit awkward, the protagonist finally asks Nolia why she keeps following him everywhere like an asylum escapee. But Nolia shyly changes the topic, and instead asks why Finn decides to fight with a sword instead of using his overpowered magic. Finn shrugs it off, saying he only knows how to fight with a blade. Surprised, Nolia can't believe he has so much magic power but is unable to manifest it. The protagonist insists he's never used magic before and that she was practically the first one he ever did magic power synchronization with. Nolia is left stunned, unable to believe that Finn has that crazy amount of magic but has never once studied it. Intrigued, Finn then asks Nolia a question about magic. He inquires about how magic works and how it's activated. Nolia explains the theory, saying magic is activated by chanting an incantation. She adds that magic is, first and foremost, about imagining the attributes before invoking the effect. She tells him it might be faster to see it in person, and then demonstrates by casting a fire arrow at a nearby tree. After the demonstration, she explains that memorization of incantations is the most popular way to learn magic. To confirm everything she said, Finn asks if by saying the incantation and imagining the effect, the magic will activate. Nolia says it should theoretically work, but tells him that with his insane power, he can probably trigger a fire arrow even without a wand like hers. Finn then decides to give it a try. Stretching out his hand, Finn repeats the incantation while visualizing gigantic flames flying through the sky like an arrow. Suddenly, a massive fire arrow erupts from his hand. The spell bursts forth with far more intensity than expected, creating a huge explosion that shakes the entire area. Nolia is shocked beyond her wits. She yells at him, asking what the heck he just invoked. The explosion sends everything and everyone flying. Nolia has to hold on to Finn to avoid getting swept away by the blast. The tremendous effect of the magic impacts the entire city. People feel the ground shaking and wonder what's happening. A maid apologizes to her lord as dishes crash onto the table from the powerful magical disturbance. When calm is finally restored, the protagonist, trying to laugh off the terrifying incident, jokes about the size of his spell. But Nolia, still rattled, insists that what he cast was nothing like a normal fire arrow. The following day at the guild, Finn chats with Rebecca and mentions he practiced magic with Nolia the day before but still can't get the hang of it. Before he can finish, Rebecca suddenly leans in, asking if he was behind those mysterious explosions reported. Finn pretends not to know anything, though flashes of the burned forest creep into his mind. Nervously, he asks if he's not allowed to practice magic, and Rebecca replies that that's not the issue. She explains that practicing magic isn't actually forbidden, but if anyone uses large-scale spells, they need guild approval. She then shows him paperwork detailing the penalties for using such magic without authorization. Just then, Nolia walks in, announcing that her wealthy family will cover any damages, and then shows an official letter from her father to back her up. Rebecca says she understands and mentions that she'll be hearing the guild master's decision soon. Nolia then presents Finn with an ornate sword from her father's collection as a thank you gift for saving her. Finn is a little freaked out by how fancy the blade looks, so he apologizes and turns it down. Surprised, Nolia asks if he doesn't like the sword, and then insists he shouldn't refuse the gift. She explains that if he doesn't accept her gratitude, the honor of her family will be at stake. Suddenly, Finn gets an idea in Nolia that rather than accepting the expensive sword, he wants her to be his magic instructor instead. Finn explains that he's only lived by the sword his whole life and isn't good at magic. Shy but determined, Nolia grabs Finn's hand and gladly agrees to teach him the basics of magic. Before they start, she mentions they should practice outside the city to avoid more explosive incidents, and Finn agrees. They head outside the city and into a scorched farmland, where Finn admits that large-scale magic is kind of wild. But Nolia clears her throat and says Finn has the wrong perception of magic. In his defense, Finn says he's always relied on a sword, so magic just seems crazy to him. Nolia cuts in, explaining that Finn overestimates magic because he's only ever lived with a sword in his hand. She further explains that when magic fails, it's not because he's missing something, it's because he's not imagining it properly. Surprised, Finn asks if he just needs to fix his perception to stabilize his power. Nolia nods, saying she's about to show him how. She drops her wand on the ground and takes his hand. Finn looks nervous, realizing she's about to synchronize their magic again, and asks if she's sure she won't faint like last time. Nolia reassures him, saying this time it's only about matching their consciousness. Embarrassed, Nolia asks Finn to start reciting the fire arrow incantation while she guides him. Finn focuses as hard as he can and begins chanting, when suddenly Nolia's voice echoes in his head. She's in his mind, calmly coaching him to make the fire smaller. Inside this strange mind world, Finn tries again and again, shrinking the flames bit by bit while Nolia patiently watches, waiting for the perfect size. She gently guides his hand to help him imagine the ideal form to activate the fire arrow. Finally, Finn nails it. The fire arrow looks just right, and Nolia signals him to launch it. He fires, hitting the mark perfectly and impressing his teacher. Excited, Finn scoops Nolia up in a celebratory hug. She turns bright red but quietly admits she's happy as his instructor. When the hug lingers a bit too long, Nolia gets flustered and says she doesn't mind the intense hug. But the Finn finally realizes he's been holding her too long and awkwardly pulls away, scared of accidentally smooching the daughter of a great nobleman. As he nervously apologizes, Nolia tells him it's fine, admitting she understands the joy of being able to control magic. After that, Nolia hands Finn a wand, telling him to try activating magic by himself this time. She explains that the wand is embedded with a magic stone, which helps reduce magic power consumption. Before Finn can even try out the wand, Nolia suddenly launches a massive ball of fire near a tree, which immediately irritates a nest of giant ants that begin swarming the area. Looking around the battlefield, Nolia estimates there are probably around 50 giant ants nearby and suggests they make them his practice opponents. Finn charges forward and starts firing off controlled fire arrows one after another. The ants drop like flies. He's excited but quickly realizes there are too many to take down one by one. Thinking outside the box, Finn remembers that magic is all about imagination. So he considers, why not try shooting multiple fire arrows at once? He envisions a rain of burning arrows and begins reciting a brand new incantation. Nolia is caught off guard by the unfamiliar chant and asks what kind of magic he's trying to cast. Finn explains that he's improvising, trying to cast something that fits the flow of battle, and asks her to back him up if he fails. Nolia can't believe what she's hearing and watches in amazement as Finn unleashes a powerful fire arrow barrage. The wave of fiery projectiles rains down and impales the ants in one go. Stunned by the sheer speed and power, Nolia watches as the swarm of ants is wiped out effortlessly. After the devastating assault, Nolia protests that what Finn just cast is completely different from what she meant. Finn asks if it was no good, and Nolia, a bit flustered, admits it's not no good, but explains they need to report this new magic to the Magic Research Institute as soon as possible, since what he cast qualifies as entirely new magic. Finn, on the other hand, is amazed by his own magical abilities. He reasons that he should start calling himself a magic swordsman to keep a low profile and stay hidden from Alfine. He then thanks Nolia for her help and declares that from today onward, he'll introduce himself as a magic swordsman rather than just a regular adventurer. Getting down on one knee, he formally requests that Nolia continue teaching him magic. Nolia accepts with a glint of happiness in her eyes, saying yes in a way that feels close to accepting a marriage proposal. Finn smiles and promises he'll be in her care from now on. Later that day, back home, Nolia returns quietly. A maid greets her, but she completely ignores the welcome and rushes straight to her room. Once inside, she can't stop thinking about Finn. She grabs the cloak he gave her earlier and, like some obsessed weirdo, sniffs it deeply. A few weeks later, deep in the forest, Nolia stands in front of Finn, ready to begin another magic lesson. She starts by explaining the three main types of magic: attack magic, support magic, and healing magic. Nolia begins with attack magic. She explains that the spells she and Finn used before fall under this category. Attack magic, she says, is simple magic that unleashes destructive energy created from magic power. However, she warns that the larger the scale, the more careful he needs to be with control. Next, Nolia shifts to support magic. She reminds Finn about the clean spell she used to remove the acid last time. Support magic, she explains, is a type of spell that affects properties. She adds that it's tricky and requires a solid understanding of the target, so it's not as straightforward as just blasting things. Next is healing magic. Nolia says it would be quicker to demonstrate it. Suddenly, she draws a knife and cuts her own hand, then casually casts healing light, healing the wound right away. Finn immediately freaks out, calling her an idiot and yelling at her for hurting herself, even if it was just for a demonstration. Blushing, Nolia thinks to herself how manly, wonderful, and kind Finn is for caring about her well-being. In a flashback, Nolia remembers the day before. That day in her room, while calmly sniffing Finn's cloak, her maid Susanna barges in to help her change clothes, catching her off guard. Furious, Nolia shouts at her not to enter without knocking, but Susanna explains that she did knock, she just got no response. Susanna then asks if Nolia has gone to meet that rumored person again, warning her that doing so is only making her father more restless. But Nolia replies that it's only natural for a master and student to hold magic lectures. Even so, Susanna warns that for someone like Nolia, the daughter of a nobleman, to spend time with a male commoner, even as his teacher, is bound to invite unnecessary scrutiny. Nolia immediately protests that she's not in that kind of relationship with Finn. But when Susanna teases her, asking if she's in love with him, Nolia panics, swearing she doesn't have any weird feelings for him. Still, Susanna doesn't buy it and cheerfully promises to help Nolia pursue her romantic interest in Finn. Back in the present, Finn snaps Nolia out of her daydream. He tells her he noticed she was just staring off into space, while Nolia looks totally embarrassed. Flustered, she suggests they end their studies here and start putting their magic theory into practice. When she asks Finn what kind of magic he'd like to try, he whips out a sword and asks if he can enchant it with magic and swing it around. Nolia calmly explains that's super difficult. She demonstrates by trying to make a flaming rock, but even with magic, it just fizzles out. She explains that while there are techniques to enchant objects, they require special ceremonies. However, she suggests that if they ask her master, Linus, for instructions, they might get a different opinion. When Finn asks who Linus is, Nolia explains that he's a big deal, the head of the magic research department back in the capital. Realizing this would mean going to the capital and possibly seeing Alfine, Finn nervously declines. Confused, Nolia asks if there's a problem with visiting the capital. Finn quickly insists there's nothing wrong and suggests they stick to getting the hang of basic attack magic first. For now, Finn just wants to keep his distance from the capital if possible. Meanwhile, in the capital, Alfine sits in her room, lost in thought. 2 weeks have passed since Finn disappeared. She's frustrated, wondering where the heck he went. She heard a report about him being seen at the coach station headed for the frontier region and can't believe he'd survive out there without her backing or connections. She recalls 2 of her friends scolding her for not treating Finn better. But Alfine insists she did everything for him, gear, money, everything, and wonders what complaints Finn could possibly have against her. Now, staring at the sword Finn left behind, Alfine can't shake the lonely feeling. Apparently, that sword was their promise to always stick together as adventurers. Overwhelmed with emotion, Alfine can't believe Finn would vanish from her life without even thinking twice. She grips the sword tightly, asking herself if Finn is truly gone. Soon after, Vigo enters her room, announcing that she's scheduled to instruct swordsmanship at the palace that day and asks her to make the necessary preparations to depart soon. Alfine puts on a brave face, saying she'll be ready in just a moment, but her thoughts are heavy. At the royal castle, Alfine faces off against the knights, putting them through a brutal training session. Even when the weak knights give up, Alfine barely breaks a sweat. After the match, the knights heap praise on her, but Alfine just grumbles since she could have ended it in a single blow. Compared to Finn, who could have gone at least 100 bouts, the knights were nothing but failures in her eyes. Watching from the sidelines, Jer, captain of the Royal Knights, tries to flatter Alfine for her impressive swordsmanship and subtly hint at wanting her to join the knights. But Alfine isn't impressed and brushes off his charm. The self-scented bozo then brings up Finn, saying he heard that Finn dumped her and left the capital altogether. This instantly pisses Alfine off. She draws her sword and threatens to cut off his future generation. But Jer gently takes her hand, saying he's only worried about her broken heart after losing her love. Frustrated, Alfine shouts enough and makes it clear to everyone that Finn is just away on a journey to grow as a swordsman. She says he'll return one day, strong enough to stand by her side. Still clinging to his fake charm, Jer tries to reassure her, offering to listen to any worries she might have. He says it's a shame she doesn't confide in him. Jer gets bold as he takes Alfine's hand and kisses it, saying the sword's sheath has received his love. Alfine is thrown off by his weird flirting, but the dude just walks away, still acting like he's the hero of a romance story, leaving Alfine even more annoyed than she already is. Suddenly, Alfine snaps. She turns to the weak knights with a menacing aura and announces a 1 versus 100 free-for-all practice, daring everyone to attack her at once. But the bunch of moronic knights panic, quickly making excuses about tea time and stomach aches. Still, Alfine stands her ground, saying anyone who refuses will have to answer directly to the king. Meanwhile, Flynn wakes up in a sweat, rattled by a terrible nightmare about Alfine. He sits on his bed, struggling to shake off the lingering trauma and barely makes it to the bathroom before throwing up. He tells himself to get a grip, but it's obvious the past still haunts him. Sometime later, he uses magic to clean himself up, thinking how convenient magic is. No towel needed. Just then, he recalls that Nolia asked for his help as an escort on the day's survey team. So he rushes to the castle and is greeted warmly by Nolia. She notices he looks unwell and asks if that's the case. Flynn admits he had a rough night but says he's fine. Nolia seems genuinely glad to have him around, saying she appreciates his help even though he's busy and is looking forward to their adventure together. Flynn, nervous, promises to do his best, but when he glances at the crowd of knights and surveyors, he notices they don't look like your average Joe, especially the knight in the black mantle. Just then, the black-mantled knight calls out to Nolia, demanding to know who the youngster is. Flynn is frightened by the threatening aura emanating from the man. But Nolia suddenly grabs Flynn's arm, urging they leave immediately since the escort mission has already started. Flynn is confused about who exactly he's supposed to protect, but Nolia tells him not to worry, saying that man doesn't actually need an escort. Flynn tries to ask more questions, but the knight with the intimidating aura interrupts, shouting at Nolia to hold up. Nolia sharply turns toward the man and with a loud shout calls him father. Flynn, in shock, can't believe that Nolia just called the scary dude father. A heated argument then follows as Nolia scolds her father for breaking his promise to stay quiet, reminding him he can go home if he keeps talking. At this point, Finn suddenly realizes who this man must be. He recognizes the intimidating figure as none other than Nolia's father, Margrave Lyod, the lord of the town. As the escort party ventures deeper into the dangerous forest, Flynn stands awkwardly, feeling out of place and still struggling to control his magic. Just yesterday, his ice spell froze the entire target group, and his air magic sent the investigation target flying. Flynn starts doubting his role, worried he's just a bodyguard in name only. Walking behind Flynn is Nolia's father, Margrave Lloyd, who struggles through the rough terrain while blamming it on his old age. Flynn considers helping the old geezer, but Nolia quickly shuts it down, telling him that her father, a former platinum-class adventurer, would never accept help. Right then, Flynn could tell that the father and daughter had some kind of rocky relationship. Suddenly, Lloyd angrily accuses Flynn of flirting with his daughter in public, shocking him. But Nolia quickly silences her overprotective dad, warning that it's dangerous to speak loudly in a place like this. But just then there's a rustling in the bushes, and someone warns that it's probably too late. Something dangerous is already coming. To everyone's shock, a massive monster with a wide, terrifying mouth bursts out. Panicking, Finn jumps into action, telling everyone to protect Nolia and Lloyd while he holds the beast back. The knights immediately rally around him, bracing themselves for battle. It's revealed that the monster is a forest wolf, and a large one at that. Before the fight escalates, Nolia calls out to Flynn, asking him to go easy, explaining that they need some monsters alive for the ecological survey. Flynn agrees but laments his cheap sword, wishing he had a better one. Then the real fight kicks in. Lloyd and the knights take on the smaller wolves while Finn faces the massive leader, the big daddy of the group. The terrifying beast lunges, but Finn reads its movements easily and takes it down with ease. The bigger the enemy, the easier it is for him to read their moves. Suddenly, two other forest wolves launch a sneak attack from the air. Before Finn can even move a muscle, the beasts are already inches from biting his head off. But luckily, someone casts a flame spell, obliterating the creatures instantly. When Finn turns in surprise, he realizes it, Nolia backing him up with magic. He then notices the remaining forest wolves are retreating and quickly calls for Nolia's attention. Wasting no time, Nolia casts a sleep spell, and one by one the wolves collapse into a peaceful slumber. As the knights rush to capture the sleeping beasts for the survey, Finn inspects his battered sword, quietly thinking about upgrading when he gets the chance. Later that night, while Finn sits by the campfire, a long-haired dude named Mice, the captain of the knights, approaches him for a friendly conversation, offering a drink. While chatting, Finn stays polite but keeps his own past vague, pretending he's just a rookie with a little merchant escort experience. Mice buys the story, laughs it off, and relaxes around the fire. Finn then points out how surprisingly skilled the knights are at camping, something he's never even seen from real knights. Mice replies, revealing that the knights there were originally platinum-class adventurers, and even though the Margrave is nobility, he prefers to hire commoners with actual field experience. Mice then decides to share Lloyd's remarkable past. He says that although Lloyd is now a noble, he actually started out as an adventurer himself, and because of that, he doesn't care much for social standing. When Flynn mentions he was never aware of this, Mice replies that most Gen Zs nowadays have no idea about that history. With a serious expression, Mice mentions that it all started during the Great Invasion, when most adventurers lost their lives. In a flashback, he reveals that this Great Invasion was a disaster from 20 years ago, when terrifying, abyss walkers poured out of the demonic forest and left the kingdom scarred. Finn also remembers, it was during that same invasion that he and Alfine lost their families. To protect what remained, adventurers were mobilized everywhere to fight against the abyss walkers. When Finn asks Mice if he also fought in the war, Mice reveals that he did, fighting alongside Lloyd and Florina, Nolia's mother. Mice explains that Florina was a rebellious mage who ditched her noble family to escape an arranged marriage and become an adventurer. After giving birth to Nolia, she ignored Lloyd's worries and joined the attacking unit anyway, just to ensure her family would survive. Right then, Finn connects the dots. Nolia lost her mother in the invasion just like he did. He realizes that despite their different circumstances, their tragic roots are surprisingly similar. Thinking deeply, Mice reflects that Florina must have been a beautiful person, and guesses that Nolia will grow into someone just as remarkable. In the present, Mice admits that Lloyd and Nolia's relationship might not have been so complicated if Florina were still alive. He adds that, although it may be difficult, the father and daughter would probably get along better if they were just honest about their feelings. Suddenly, Lloyd approaches their conversation, asking if there's a problem. Finn immediately tenses up, feeling the weight of his intimidating presence. However, Lloyd surprises him by offering an expensive knight's sword and asks him to use it during the investigation. Lloyd says his reason is simple. Finn's sword has gone dull, and for swordsmen, having proper equipment is essential, even if it means going into debt sometimes. At first, Flynn politely accepts the sword, but on noticing how expensive it is, he desperately tries to refuse the generous gift, saying he can't possibly compensate for it. But Lloyd insists it's fine and he wants him to take it. Before Flynn can refuse again, Lloyd makes it clear he's not taking no for an answer. Mice laughs, seeing Lloyd unusually determined. To make matters worse, Mice reveals that the sword is normally given only to official knights, causing Flynn to freak out. He immediately rejects it again, knowing that if he accepts, he might be recruited as a knight himself. That would mean a background check, exposing his real identity, and then his worst nightmare, Alfine finding him. Lloyd notices the weird look on Finn's face and asks if he's dissatisfied with the gift. Finn tries once more to protest, but Lloyd shuts him down, telling him to just use the sword. Nolia then steps in, advising Finn to just accept it, saying it's pointless to argue since her father is more stubborn than my toxic ex. Lloyd, clearly irritated by her bluntness, tells her off. But Nolia snaps right back, telling her old man to shut it and reminds him he's being way too loud while camping outside. Standing off to the side, Finn starts to feel bad for the Margrave, who's getting absolutely roasted by his own daughter. After all the noise, Finn finally agrees to borrow the sword for the investigation only. Lloyd is still fuming, while Nolia and Flynn prepare for the next steps, wrapping up the second day of the investigation. On the third day of the expedition, Finn suddenly calls Mice's attention to something big up ahead, blocking the road to the investigation site. Before Mice can react, Finn quickly jumps into action, promising he'll go ahead and take care of it. Right then, Finn sneaks through the trees and gets a clear look. he spots two dragonets lounging by themselves. He knows that if they start roaring, every magical beast nearby will swarm in. Thinking fast, Finn realizes he needs to silence them before things get out of hand. Inspiration strikes when he remembers the silence magic spell Nolia uses on her old man all the time. Without wasting a second, Finn casts silence, cutting off all sound from the dragonets and forming a silence bubble around them. Finn then dives straight in, launching himself from the trees and rushing the first dragonet. The beast tries to roar, but nothing comes out. Finn slashes down hard, clean, and silent, finishing the fight before the lizard can even react. For the second dragonet, Finn impales its neck, finishing it off instantly. With the monsters defeated, Lloyd approaches Finn and praises his clean, efficient technique. Mice and the other knights also congratulate Finn on the easy victory. Receiving their praise, Finn finally feels like he's truly pulling his weight as part of the escort team. Mice grins and suggests they celebrate with a feast, using the fresh dragonet meat as dinner. Nolia smiles and agrees, saying she actually loves dragonet meat. Soon after, the team finally arrives at their investigation destination, a location overflowing with strong mana and magical beast presence. Finn is in awe of the place's beauty, but there's no time to relax. Nolia quickly casts a powerful barrier, Sanctuary, to keep the magical beasts out. With that done, she announces the start of the investigation, safely inside the barrier she created. Afterward, the researchers break down what they've discovered so far. The earthquake from the year before had damaged an underground water vein connected to the demonic forest, releasing concentrated mana into the area, and this triggered the recent magical beast outbreak. The group learns that the location is directly connected to the demonic forest, even though it's quite a distance away. However, Nolia reassures everyone that the area should be safe now that the water flow has been sealed. Still, Finn stays on guard, watching the mysterious forest in the distance. He knows this is the same demonic forest where the outbreak of the Abyss Walkers began, so he's not letting his guard down. Later that night, the team decides to set up camp after finding a safe spot. As the group settles in, Nolia steps up with dinner. She hands Finn some roasted dragonet meat, and he's honestly impressed by how delicious it looks. Sitting down by the fire, Finn thanks her for the meal, and Nolia admits she only made something simple since they're camping. Finn digs in and tells her not to worry, it tastes great. Nolia gets a little flustered by the compliment, especially when Finn casually says she'll make a good wife someday. That one catches her off guard, and the vibe turns awkward for a second. Finally breaking the silence, Finn mentions that he didn't expect Nolia to handle camp cooking, but she explains she's used to preparing food in the field. As Nolia takes a bite of the dragonet meat, she says it's all thanks to Finn for draining the meat properly that the meal turned out so tasty. Finn then explains that the secret to preparing dragonet meat is to drain all the blood in one go, otherwise it'll smell terrible. As he speaks, he remembers teaching Alfine this exact thing before, but she just didn't learn. He also recalls that while Alfine is perfect at everything else, household chores are her personal disaster zone. Nolia and Finn continue to share a quiet moment, until Lloyd interrupts with his intimidating presence. Nolia immediately tells him that if he has something to say, he should just say it. Before Lloyd can say a word, Finn hands back the sword he borrowed, calling it a true masterpiece and saying he wants to return it since their investigation wrapped up smoothly. But Lloyd isn't letting it go. He calls Finn inflexible and tells him to keep the sword. Nolia cuts in, pointing out that if Finn doesn't want it, Lloyd should respect his decision and stop acting like a spoiled brat. Before the father and daughter can launch into their usual bickering, Finn steps in and tells Lloyd that he'd rather get a sword suited to him, even offering to go into debt for it, if needed. Lloyd thinks it over, then agrees to help by reaching out to a blacksmith he knows and offers the sword as a reward anyway, assuring Finn there's no obligation to become a knight. With that, Finn finally humbly accepts, both grateful and a bit relieved. But suddenly, Lloyd looms over him with an intense glare, announcing he'll hand over the sword, but his daughter is off-limits. Finn freezes and starts to sweat, but just then, Nolia casts a silence spell, sealing her father's lips shut. Meanwhile, at Alfine's mansion, she sits alone in a massive dining hall, quietly sighing. She stares at her food, lost in thought, admitting to herself that it's already been a month since Finn left. At first, she struggled to accept the fact that Finn had run away. But now, after a month, she's starting to see things differently. Sadly, Alfine admits she's been spoiled. Flashbacks show her clinging to Finn since childhood, always believing she could get away with anything because they'd been together since birth. She even went as far as telling everyone that Finn was her lover, just to keep other girls away. Alfine finally admits that, even though everyone calls her the Sword Saintess, in truth she's just selfish and short-tempered. She realizes that Finn had always been kind and understanding toward her, despite how terribly she treated him. Quietly, Alfine apologizes to Finn in her thoughts as she cries a river. She can't help but wonder if things would have ended differently if she'd just been more honest with him. Suddenly, Vigo knocks and enters with news from the Adventurers Guild. He mentions there's been a development in the search for Finn. Alfine sits up, alert, as the butler reveals that a man wearing Finn's platinum insignia is being held in Algren. Her eyes widen in surprise, shocked that Finn might be far away in the city of Algren. She immediately wants to know how anyone recognized Finn's insignia. Vigo lowers his voice, revealing it's normally classified information. But since Alfine is in the king's favor, she gets special access. However, he asks her to keep it secret, and Alfine swears it on her sword, promising not to tell a soul. Vigo then explains that all high-ranked adventurer insignias have a secret engraving for identification, along with a record of personal information shared across all guilds. He says only top guild officials and a few nobles know about this system. Alfine is stunned to hear this for the first time. The butler confirms that the man with Finn's insignia has already been transferred to the guild in Algren. Clenching her fist, Alfine asks Vigo if he thinks Finn is actually in Algren. Vigo replies that, for now, only Finn's insignia has been found, but there's still merit in investigating. Alfine agrees, promising to request leave from the king, and immediately orders Vigo to begin preparations to depart for Algren. Vigo bows in acknowledgement and leaves at once. Sometime later, Alfine steps out of the estate, no longer willing to shut herself away. She's ready to begin her personal search for Finn, and it starts with heading to Algren. Before long, Finn walks into the guild, and every adventurer starts looking at him weirdly as they whisper about his incredible accomplishments. The atmosphere in the guild grows tense as everyone stares, making Finn visibly uncomfortable. Just then, Rebecca calls out to Finn from behind the counter, urging him to hurry with his paperwork before the queue gets crowded. Finn says he's coming and quickly approaches the counter, while lamenting how nervous everyone seems around him. Rebecca then explains why everyone's acting so weird. She says it's because of all the overpowered feats he's pulled off in the past couple of days. On top of that, he's now wielding a special sword from the Margrave himself. She adds that everyone in the guild now sees him like a walking natural disaster. However, Flynn nervously tries to brush it off, saying he just learned to control his magic and that the sword was just a reward. Turns out, rumors about Flynn have spread so far that veteran adventurers now use his name as a warning. Nobody wants to mess with the magic swordsman Flynn. As Rebecca wraps up his paperwork, she asks him to hand over his insignia for processing as well. Surprised to hear this, Flynn takes it off and hands it over to her. To his major surprise, Rebecca returns with a new bronze badge. Excited, she announces that he has officially ranked up to bronze, thanks to the dragonette job and all the god-tier feats he's pulled off lately. The protagonist receives the bronze insignia with gratitude, thankful that now he can secure more bags with his new rank. But suddenly, Rebecca tells Finn that a personal request has been received, for him specifically. Finn is confused, wondering who could be so whimsical as to make a request for him just as he reached bronze rank. To his utter shock, Rebecca reveals that the whimsical requester is actually the Margrave. She hands Finn a letter and explains that the Margrave wants to put him in charge of a certain matter. After that, she asks him to make his way to the Margrave's estate. A few minutes later, Finn arrives at the Margrave's estate and is greeted at the gate by Mice, who cheerfully offers to show him the way inside. As Finn walks deeper into the estate, he notices the place feels more like a fortress than a noble's mansion. He tries to hide his surprise, but Mice quickly picks up on it and asks if he was expecting something fancier. Finn fumbles but replies no. Nevertheless, Mice explains why the place looks so practical. He says Lloyd uses his funds for knights, weapons, and emergency preparedness, not luxury. He adds that some nobles in the capital call them war fanatics, but here, they're always ready for another great invasion. Mice then leads Finn to a door and calls out for entry. A voice from inside tells them to come in. Finn is ushered into a private meeting with Nolia, Lloyd, and maid Susanna, all seated around a formal-looking table. Nolia greets him warmly, telling Finn to relax and pick any seat. But Finn gets right to business, nervously announcing that he's there to confirm the details of Lloyd's direct request. Lloyd begins explaining the job. He says his sword needs repairs and he wants Finn to take it to their exclusive blacksmith. While he's at it, Finn can also get his own sword made. Grateful for the offer, Finn thanks him, but Lloyd isn't done. He warns that the blacksmith is a total maniac and then launches into a full explanation as to why. Lloyd explains that the blacksmith's workshop is located in the hunting grounds near the demonic forest. Lloyd calls the guy a complete weirdo with a huge body and endless energy. Finn gets visibly uneasy hearing all this information and wonders if Nolia knows about this strange blacksmith. But Nolia remains completely unfazed, calmly sipping her tea. However, Lloyd guarantees that the blacksmith's swords are top quality. He hands Finn a map and informs him that the blacksmith has already been contacted. Following that, Lloyd asks if Finn will accept the job. Without thinking much, Finn agrees and says he'll humbly take it on. Just as Finn accepts the mission, Nolia, who had been silent until now, offers to be his guide, saying she knows the blacksmith's location. She then invites him to stay for dinner before heading out. But Lloyd snaps, yelling at Nolia for wanting to leave with the youngster again. Before he can finish his complaints, Nolia casts silence magic and shuts his lips tight. After the awkward dinner that night, Nolia sits in her room, lost in thought about what to wear for the next day, until Susanna snaps her out of her daydream, asking if she's even listening to what she's been saying. Susanna then asks if Nolia was thinking about Finn, causing Nolia's face to turn bright red instantly as she tries to deny it. However, the maid reveals she's already noticed how Nolia always wants to be around Finn lately, and Nolia goes quiet, clearly busted. Susanna then points out that she's also noticed Lloyd has taken a liking to Finn. She mentions that even though Lloyd is usually impossible to please, he's actually been cracking smiles around Finn. For a moment, Nolia thinks about what Susanna just said and guesses that maybe Finn's performance during the investigation won her father over. She starts reflecting on her father's changing attitude toward Finn. Thanks to Susanna's insight, Nolia realizes that Lloyd has acknowledged Finn's abilities. She even starts wondering if Lloyd bestowing Finn with a knight's sword might mean he's planning to appoint Finn as a retainer someday. Suddenly, Nolia begins imagining a romantic fantasy. She pictures Finn kneeling before her, promising to protect her for the rest of his life. In her daydream, they share an intimate moment outside the estate. But just then, back in the room, Nolia scolds herself for having wild imaginations and for getting carried away with her romantic thoughts. Even though Finn has declined the opportunity, she admits she can't help having certain expectations in her heart. Nolia can't help but drown in her feelings for Finn. She confesses she wants to be pierced by his sharp but kind gaze and to be hugged tightly by his sturdy arms. Susanna senses something's off and gently asks if something is troubling her. Nolia admits she feels like an awful woman for having these feelings. Finally, Nolia opens up about her inner conflict and emotions for Finn. She says that even though their statuses are mismatched, she still wants her feelings to be reciprocated. She knows the social barriers between them, but she can't help how she feels. Susanna tries to comfort her troubled mistress. She tells Nolia not to worry so much about the arrangements and promises to do something about it. But Nolia quickly grabs her maid's hand, asking her to stop and not to do anything unnecessary. She says she's fine the way she is. Touched, Susanna gently comforts her, calling her awkward but in a kind way, and says that she's just like her father. After the emotional roller coaster, Susanna leaves the room, reminding Nolia to rest for the trip tomorrow. The night closes with Nolia trying to sleep, hugging Finn's cloak and softly whispering his name to herself. The following day, Finn and Nolia arrive at the entrance of the Grand Canyon on their journey to meet the blacksmith. Finn glances around and admits he hasn't really explored this area before, while Nolia stands beside him, clutching her staff tightly. Nolia hesitates, her face slightly flushed, but finally speaks up. She asks if Finn would like to check out the nice view on the other side of a nearby cabin, and Finn agrees with an easy smile. This unexpectedly makes Nolia excited. She grabs his hand and pulls him along, eagerly leading him toward the cliffside. As the two head to the destination together, Finn can't help but notice how happy Nolia seems. But suddenly, Nolia trips near the edge. Fortunately, Finn catches her in his arms just in time, steadying her before she falls. He gently reminds her to watch her step, and Nolia, embarrassed, quickly apologizes, her cheeks burning as she realizes how close they are. She becomes hyper-aware of his strong arms holding her so easily, like she's a kitten and her heart is pounding so loudly, she's worried he might hear it. When Finn softly asks if she can stand, Nolia quietly responds by asking him to hold her while she takes in the view, worried she might fall again. Finn smiles and then pulls her in closer, arms wrapped around her, while Nolia feels like her heart is about to burst. The two share a special moment, admiring the breathtaking scenery. Finn then points out a river running down from the mountains, explaining that the whole canyon floods once every few decades. Nolia listens, still held close, marveling at the view and the story. Suddenly, their eyes meet, and Nolia panics for a split second before quickly glancing away, embarrassed. Shortly after, Nolia notices something unusual about Finn that she's never seen before. She asks if there's a tattoo on his neck, specifically wondering if the pattern is an ear of wheat, and admits she's never noticed it until now. A bit embarrassed, Finn claims that the tattoo is a charm for warding off illnesses, something passed down in his hometown. He adds that its effects supposedly weaken if shown to others. Nolia then asks if that's the reason he usually wears clothes that cover his neck. Finn, dying of shyness, says yes. Just then, Finn reflects on the tattoo's true significance. In truth, the tattoo was given to him by the director of the orphanage where he grew up. Finn quietly worries that if anyone found out its real origin, it could cause trouble. Thinking about it, Finn begins to wonder if the director of the orphanage is doing okay. A few days ago, Finn had gone to the guild to arrange a money transfer. He asked if he could send money to an orphanage, and Rebecca assured him it was possible. Finn then filled out the paperwork, but asked if there was any way to send the money anonymously. Rebecca said yes, and explained how the guild supports orphanages across the land. However, she mentioned that Finn would have to pay a fixed fee to use the anonymous donation system. Finn agreed to pay the fee and told her to go ahead with the registration. After finishing the paperwork, Finn happily handed over his coins, feeling relieved that he could support the orphanage he grew up in. With the transaction complete, he told Rebecca that he would be heading to the workshop in the hunting ground. Rebecca looked surprised at his destination, but Finn explained that he had accepted Margrave's request. Concerned, Rebecca warned him about the blacksmith's weird personality, but admitted the guy was undeniably good at his craft. Finn also recalled Margrave's warning about the blacksmith being a total weirdo, but still hoped for a peaceful trip. Curious, Finn asked Rebecca what kind of place the hunting ground actually was. Instead of answering directly, Rebecca simply reassured him that with his skills there shouldn't be any problem. After a few quick goodbyes, Finn set off for the journey. Now, back in the present, Finn suggests they keep moving, and Nolia, looking a bit down, agrees. Suddenly, Finn notices their pace is mismatched, with Nolia falling behind. He starts to call out, but a shadow looms overhead. Finn immediately shouts for Nolia to get down, just as a giant gale eagle swoops in from above. Finn reacts fast, diving to protect Nolia as the eagle strikes. Wasting no time, Finn prepares a spell and shouts, "Air Blade!" This causes a ripple of sharp wind to slice through the air, but the eagle dodges at the last second. Suddenly, Nolia urgently calls out to Finn, questioning what type of magic he'd use against such a fast-flying threat. Before he can respond, the massive eagle circles back into view, swooping above them. Then, with calm focus, Finn begins casting, gathering wind around his hand, whispering for the invisible air to become a solid barrier. Instantly, a swirl of wind bursts forth, and both Nolia and the eagle sense something's off. As the monstrous eagle dives to attack, Finn unleashes his wind barrier directly at the creature. The eagle is caught off guard and struck down mid-flight. Feathers scatter across the ground as Finn surveys the aftermath with a newfound confidence, while Nolia stands stunned, clutching her staff. Reflecting, Nolia is surprised to see Finn using a defensive spell in such a creative way and hurriedly makes a mental note to update her magic textbook later. Meanwhile, Finn wonders aloud if his way of using magic is too unconventional, but Nolia quickly reassures him. She tells him his flexible thinking is wonderful and urges him to keep using magic in the way that suits him best. She says it's because he's a swordsman that he's able to use magic without being locked into a rigid mold. However, Finn admits he still hasn't adjusted to fighting from a distance. His instincts are all about close combat. But Nolia encourages him again, saying there's no need to copy magicians or swordsmen. He just needs to do what feels right. She explains that someone with rare magic talent and sword skills like Finn should never lock themselves into one style. Nolia adds that he can develop his own way of fighting, not quite a magician, not quite a swordsman, but something entirely new. She tells him he'll be fine and predicts that one day he'll become a magic swordsman known across the country. Following this, Nolia pulls out a map, ready to confirm their route. Finn watches her, suddenly realizing just how knowledgeable she really is, despite looking so young. Before he can say anything else, Nolia takes off ahead, announcing that they'll soon arrive at the hunting ground. Meanwhile, in the city of Algren, a mining city blanketed in smoke, Alfine and her butler have just arrived in search of Finn. As they step into the city, Vigo explains the smoke is due to the extensive mining activities carried out across the area, but Alfine's focus is elsewhere. As they walk through the streets of Algren, she quietly wonders if Finn might be somewhere nearby. The only thing on her mind is how she'll apologize if she ever finds him, and hopes they can part peacefully. Before long, their search leads them to a building where Alfine is welcomed by a woman who offers to guide her inside. She's brought to a prison area and led straight to a man behind bars. The guy looks like he hasn't showered in months and is clearly irritated at having his sleep disturbed. But the moment he's face to face with Alfine, she wastes no time grabbing his shirt and grilling him about the platinum insignia and his false identity. The man tries to play innocent, but Alfine coldly pushes harder, demanding his cooperation and asking for information about the real person he impersonated. Finally, the spineless prisoner crumbles. He confesses he got the insignia from a young man slumped over in the slums. He describes the man as small-framed, with rare dark hair and a pretty face, almost like a girl's. Alfine's patience snaps. She grabs the bars and demands to know what the heck happened to the slumped man and where he is now. Terrified, the prisoner blurts out that sick people from the slums are taken in by the church, but claims he doesn't know anything more. Alfine then asks why he stole the insignia and faked his status. The man admits that life in the ghetto is brutal, and he thought posing as a platinum-class adventurer would get him better treatment. At that moment, the guide beside Alfine confirms his story. She explains that while the guild doesn't track everyone, some sick people from the slums are indeed taken to the church each day. The woman then asks Alfine if she'd like to visit the church. Alfine agrees, and her guide promises to make the necessary arrangements. After leaving the prison, Alfine and Vigo try to piece things together. The old butler suspects the slumped-over figure sounds a lot like Finn. Alfine wants to believe it, but she tries to convince herself it must be someone else. She says there's no way Finn could get sick in a place like that. Vigo replies gently, saying it would actually be nice if that were true. Sometime later, Alfine and Vigo head to the spot where the man resembling Finn had collapsed, hoping to gather more information. The area is bleak, littered with trash, and the mood is just as heavy. Alfine crouches on the ground, quietly wondering if Finn really did collapse in such a shady place. Vigo calmly explains that even the healthiest people can get sick from stress, exhaustion, and adjusting to a tough new environment. As Alfine listens, guilt begins to swell in her chest. Silently, she blames herself, believing she might be the reason Finn ended up this way. Before long, they move through a shabby district where outsiders lounge around, some smoking, others drinking. When Alfine comments on how idle the people are, just hanging around doing nothing, Vigo notes that most folks there don't have stable jobs. That said, Alfine suggests they hurry to the church so as not to get mixed up with local troublemakers. But just then, she bumps into a young girl. After a startled apology, the local brat tries to sneak away with Alfine's pouch. But Alfine catches on instantly and calmly calls out the thief, asking for her pouch back. The thief in training denies everything, but suddenly, a boy named Yuri rushes in, calling out the girl, Liz, for her actions. He scolds her harshly, warning she'll end up in jail if she keeps it up. Liz pushes back, claiming she only steals because she's hungry. With the two brats arguing, Vigo quietly explains to Alfine that these little menaces are likely immigrants' children, just drifting and struggling to survive. He points out how hard it is for youngsters like them to make a decent living in this town. Alfine is touched by the story. She kneels down, looks directly at Liz and Yuri, and gently tells Liz that food bought with stolen money never tastes good. Liz hesitates, but the words sink in. Yuri then promises to apologize on Liz's behalf and urges her to return the pouch. The young boy boldly declares that he'll grow up fast, get a job, and make sure Liz can eat her fill. His words hit Alfine hard, stirring up memories of her own childhood. She sadly remembers when a young Finn made a similar promise, to grow up quickly and protect her. Back in the present, the pouch is returned with a flurry of apologies from the kids. Alfine thanks them, then encourages them both to be kind to each other from now on. They agree with smiles and run off down the street. As the mini menaces dash away, Alfine reflects. If she could be as straightforward as that boy, maybe she could change too. But just then, Vigo calls out, snapping her back to reality. She quickly apologizes and urges they keep moving. Sometime later, they arrive at a church. Inside, a nun welcomes them. When Vigo explains that they're looking for a black-haired man who collapsed in the slums a few days ago, the nun nods and says she's already been informed by the guild. She recalls clearly that a man with black hair was indeed brought to the church recently. But then, with a sad expression, she adds that by the time he arrived, he had already been called to glory. Alfine freezes, unable to believe what she just heard. Her heart nearly stops as she shouts, asking if the nun is saying that Finn is dead. Startled, the nun timidly answers yes, then explains that because the man's identity couldn't be confirmed, his body was placed in an underground room for the time being. Tears stream down Alfine's face. She can't believe it. She'll never get to see Finn again, let alone apologize to him. The nun gently adds that since the remains are still unidentified, she can take Alfine to confirm whether the corpse is truly the person she's searching for. Right then, Alfine faces a harsh decision. Return without confirmation and live with the uncertainty, or gather the strength to see her childhood friend's lifeless body. With pain swelling in her chest, Alfine realizes she can't ignore this any longer. Trembling, she asks to see the remains. The nun then leads them to a cold stone room, and Alfine slowly approaches the coffin. Silently, she begs the universe for it to be anyone else. Before opening the lid, the nun warns her that the sight might be unpleasant, since the man died days ago, but Alfine insists. With that, the coffin is opened, and Alfine immediately recoils from the sight. The nun steadies her as she tries to regain her composure. Alfine studies the body closely. The corpse has the same height, the same dark hair, the same clothes as Finn, but nothing is certain. Then suddenly she remembers. She and Finn shared the same wheat tattoo. Desperate, she reaches for the dead man's collar and gently opens it. There it is, the wheat tattoo. Shock hits Alfine like a wave as the truth crashes down, making her believe that the man in the coffin is really Finn. Memories of Finn's smile flood her mind as Alfine begins to cry uncontrollably, begging for it to be a lie. She pleads for Finn to wake up, to greet her like always, but nothing happens. Breaking down, she screams out in agony, cursing his cruel fate and her own mountain of regrets. Overwhelmed, Alfine collapses in anguish, leaving only the old butler standing quietly by her side. Will Alfine ever get to discover Finn is alive and find him? Comment "Toxic Girlfriend" if you're hyped to see what happens next in Part 2. If you enjoyed this video, drop a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more awesome content. Thanks for watching, as always.